Good morning. Even though I couldn't be in class today, I wanted to take an opportunity to go over the homework that was due today, especially since I've encountered people with a number of questions. So, let's take a look at, we'll start with number one here. Alright, so, I have to write the domain and range using interval notation. I'm going to be starting with the domain. Now, with the domain, that means I just care about my inputs, which means just my values on the x-axis. I do not care about the y-axis right now. So I'm going to take a look at the function I have here. And, let's see, whoops. My first value is right here at -1, +1. Now, again, I don't care about the y value. So for what I'm doing right now, I don't care about this second value. I only care about my first input, which is -1. And that's going to give me the minimum of this function, or the minimum of my domain. So I'm going to go with -1. Now, since there's a solid dot there, I'm going to go with brackets. Alright, now for the maximum. Just look all the way over here, and this is my furthest point. My furthest point down the x-axis. Now, the coordinates for this would be +4, +6. Now, since I'm concerned just with my domain, I do not care about that y value. All I care about is my x value. So, the maximum here is going to be 4. Now, if you notice the dot here, it is not colored in, which means I do not include 4. So if you don't include something using interval notation, you're going to use a parenthesis instead of a bracket. And I've just covered the domain of this first function. Now I have to cover the range. Now, whereas before I said I didn't care about the y value, now that's all I care about. So, I'm going to go with green here, kind of festive. Alright, so I'm just concerned with my y values now, because the range is concerning the y values or outputs. So, again, I'm going to look at my point here. My point is -1, +1. Now this time, I don't care about the x-axis, because all I care about is the range. So I don't care about that first value. All I care about is that second value. So the bottom of the function, the lowest point, would be right here. So it's going to be +1. And again, since we have a solid dot, I'm going to go with a bracket. Now I'm going to go to the highest point of this function, which is, again, up here we only have 2 points. So I'm going to rewrite my coordinates here, which would be +4, +6. Now, since I'm concerned with the range, I do not care about the domain. I don't care about that first value. All I care about is the second one. And that would be 6. So, since it's an open dot, I'm going to use parentheses. And I've just covered the domain range for that first example. So it's not that bad. Just remember, when you talk about the domain, all you care about is the x-axis. That's all you care about for the domain. When you talk about the range, all you care about is the y-axis right here. Now, for this one, let's take a look. I wanted to go over this one because I've done some reading and I wanted to include something with this. Alright, so for the domain, again, I'm only concerned about the x. So the point furthest to my left here would be -2, 0. Don't care about the y. Point furthest to the right would be right here. +2, -2. Don't care about the y because we're just talking about domain. So, the domain here, since they're both open dots, we just use parentheses, -2, +2. Now the range. This is why I want to talk to you guys. And hopefully you're all taking the time to watch this. This value down here. And before I was telling you to put a solid dot, because that's what we would assume. However, upon further inspection, we can't assume that it's quite landing there. Thing is, that's why we don't have a dot. If we're not sure if it's landing there, then we're going to have to go with parentheses. So in this case, you're going to notice we have -3. That's where my lowest point is, right here on the y-axis. So we go with the parentheses this time. Again, that's because we don't have a dot there. So we're not going to assume there's a dot. Before I was just drawing it in saying, oh, it's missing, but we're going to assume it's not even there if they're not putting one. Okay, so now I look for the highest value on my y-axis. Now, some people have been asking me, but Mr. Gamache, we have two lines going on here. This one and this one. Here's the thing to think about, though. It's one function. Just because you got two lines going on doesn't change anything. It's still only one function. So, got my bottom right here. The top would be right here. And we wrote that ordered pair earlier here. We had -2, 0. Now, here's the thing. We don't care about the x-axis if we're talking about the range. We don't care about that first value. All we care about is that second value. So the highest y value on our function here is going to be at 0. And we have an open dot, so we're going to go with the parentheses. So one thing to really pull from this, as I just showed you guys, right here, if you don't see a dot, don't assume what is there. I was previously telling you guys to do that, but as I said, just for our safety and to make sure we're doing this right, we're going to assume there's nothing there, unless they give us something. Alright, so let's take a look at number 3 now. Alright, again, no dot. So we're going to assume that there is nothing there. Let's start with our range. Goes all the way across that x-axis. Now you'll notice we have arrows. Those arrows means that that line goes on forever. So for our domain, we could assume that if we made this graph bigger, that this would just keep going and going. So that would give us infinity in that case. Now remember, when we're dealing with infinity, always use parentheses, because infinity never stops. So that would be all real numbers, really, because everything number line is considered a real number. Now, if we went to the range, going up and down here, okay? Let's take a look at our lowest value. Now, we're looking at the lowest value. We've got two places here. We've got arrows going down. So that means that the lowest possible value, we can't see it on here because it just goes on forever. So that would be negative infinity. Now I want to look for my highest value. So I'm looking at my function, going up. Oh, okay, we get to here. Now again, I know I was saying to use a solid dot, but upon further inspection, we're just going to use an open dot because we're not sure where it quite lands here. If they wanted to be right at 3, they would give us a dot, but they're not giving us one. So we're going to say it's at 3, or just about, but we're going to use parentheses because we're never quite sure if it's touching 3. I wanted to go over those examples because I noticed there were some questions. So I wanted to